So just to give you a quick rundown, Elizabeth Warren is continuing the rise. Real Clear Politics does an average of all the bigger polls, which I think I brought up before, and they have her at a 23% average. And then Biden is down to 27.2%. Sanders got a little jump at 17.8%. Those obviously being your big three candidates. Harris continued to tank. No surprises there. She's awful. And Mayor Pete, who's also kind of in discussion, stayed consistent, right around 5%. He and Yang have stayed pretty stable the entire race ever since both of them came to relevance. But yeah, that's interesting stuff. Warren kind of continues to jump, and we've talked about many times before on here how she always just has a steady performance in debates. She sticks to her game plan, and we kind of questioned on the first one if that strategy would work. In our second podcast, we said, well, it seems to be working a little bit, and now it's like
it's working.
Yeah, it is working. Yeah, so props to her staff and everyone involved with her campaign, because whatever she's doing right. To rise in the polls at this point in the election, like that is honestly pretty impressive.
Very diverse following.
Yeah,
that was sarcasm though.
But it kind of leaves the question when you read those poll numbers off. It's always been a rumor. But, the last couple of years since the election of Donald Trump, they got really close in the Senate and tried, really hard to work together to pass certain bills. Is a Bernie Warren ticket appealing? And
should be.
And if so, does that, put them over the edge of Biden? What are you thinking there?
Look, this will be a quick answer on my part. To all the people that look at this election as an election to beat Donald Trump, a Bernie Warren ticket should look appealing to you. You're taking two of the big three. On the other hand, you're also taking the two that I think are at least better candidates than the other one by a lot.
Yeah.
So it should look appealing to you in terms of beating Donald Trump in 2020.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, you look at the Warren supporters and the Bernie supporters. It's kind of weird with Warren being a little fluid in politics with where she stands on things. But she has credit where it's due. The last few years, she has fought right alongside with Bernie and stuck to her ideals. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, she has a fan base that Bernie kind of doesn't, but they all sort of respect Bernie, so I don't see the same on the other side. So a lot of Bernie supporters do not like Warren, and they have their disagreements with Warren. Yeah, they don't like how she hasn't been as consistent as Bernie.
He tries to run with his policies, but not the same way.
So I think, if you put those two together, I'm not saying you're going to add 23 and 17.8 in the polls.
No.
But whichever way it goes, that's gonna be a huge jump, and I do think that would be enough to take out Biden. And I mean, all three of them as of right now are polling much higher than Trump in a head-to-head. So that's very appealing. And Bernie and Warren both have different groups of following.
Yeah.
So you're pulling in a good percentage of the population there.
Pulling from two areas.
Yeah. So we'll see if that happens. The one thing that obviously gets in the way, and it's joked about all the time, but in order to run for president, you have to have a bit of an ego. You want to be the head of the government. You want to be top dog. So the willingness to drop out and join another candidate, probably isn't. It's difficult, but on that same token,
they're also two difficult people for it to happen to, right? Like you hate to see one of those two who have kind of put in their entire adult life into bettering politics or trying to better politics have to now drop out of the presidential race when they're both near the end of probably their government serving. it's tough to see, but I think it's very appealing. It should be very appealing still.
Yeah, and I don't think you should rule it out either, because every single debate, if they've been on the stage at the same time, it's always been Bernie and Warren will not attack each other. Their campaigns.
You can
talk,
see how much respect they have for each other.
They
on
respect
stage.
each other and they don't go at each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that should leave some opening there for, the idea of them joining up, because they're not, they don't hate each other. They haven't really went at each other in the campaign.
Yeah.
It'll basically just come down to ego. So we'll see what happens there, and who knows, maybe both of them already have ideas about different people they want for their VP, but time will tell. Time will tell. And that brings us to the second viewer question of the week, which I wanted to incorporate here, and that is understanding polling. So Mommer and I both study political science, so this is the kind of weird stuff that we get to look at all the time. A lot I've heard, it's got to be dozens of times now since the 2016 election. You can't trust the polls. The polls are wrong. That message, because the majority of the polls had, a projection of Hillary beating Donald Trump. But it's not that simple. You have to look into this a little more.
Yeah.
It's called margin of error. It's the idea basically that there are outside factors that can't always be accounted for in polling data.
Yeah.
And it develops a margin of error. So if you look into a good poll, they will include this. So you'll see something like, we'll use the two 2016 candidates, for example, Hillary 48%, Donald Trump 46.7%, margin of error 3.8. What that 3.8 means is that it could be plus or minus 3.8 percentage points in either direction, which leaves the possibility of Donald Trump winning that election. And any good, credible poll had that. The polls were not all wrong.
Yeah.
There's just an election that was as odd as the last one. There's a lot of outside factors that, could make people say, well, I don't know who I'm voting for. Even though maybe they have their mind dead set, I'm voting for Trump. Or, they say they're voting for Hillary, but they're actually just not going to vote at all.
Friends think they should vote for Hillary, and they're actually voting for Trump. Maybe they say they're voting for Hillary. Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the societal bias. What is the right answer to give?
Yeah. And to give a better understanding of margin of error, so like 2 polls were just released, Nevada and South Carolina. And so Nevada's was conducted by SSRS, and it was, I think, 324 likely Democratic caucus participants. And even the margin of error plus minus there was 7.1 percentage points. That's a big margin of error for one state and one party. So you got to understand there's a lot of factors that can make that margin of error bigger or smaller, but still have an impact on polling numbers, I guess. So
yeah, and obviously the more participants you get in a poll, the less that margin of error will be. So as you heard him say in that study, there were 324 participants. In a good poll, they've always said it includes around 1,200 people, and that's speaking more on national terms, but it applies to the state level as well. But that's why you see the big margin of error like that. So to everyone's saying that the polls are wrong, or
polls are never right.
Yeah, that you can't predict to a T hardly ever what exactly is going to happen.
It's like weather.
But those people, it's their job. They know what they're doing, and that's the reason they throw in the margin of errors, because they're saying we're accounting for these biases or reasons that people might not answer or might answer that we don't know. And any good, credible poll was not wrong in 2016.
Not everything can be done to perfection.
Yeah. And so our last presidential update, we kind of came up with this question ourselves, but we were looking at with Yang polling between around 3 and 5% consistently,
but a good following.
Excuse me. Yeah, a good following. Does he pose a good VP selection for anyone?
I think he does.
Do
To
you?
me, he poses it. Okay, well,
I think he does too.
I'm Yang Gang. I'm a fan of him. I think, obviously, like we've said in the past podcasts, he's refreshing, transparent. His ideas are just fun to hear, and I think he's good for politics. So yeah, on all those factors alone, I think he would make a really good VP because, look, in the Obama administration, how did most people view Biden? They viewed him as the lighthearted underling of Obama, who everyone loved.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not comparing Yang to Biden, but I think Yang can be a very well-respected, lovable
Yes.
VP and someone who obviously is at the top of our federal government. VP is basically, you're right there
Yeah.
in everything, and I think he'd honestly be perfect for that. I think he's good for president, so why wouldn't he be good for VP, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think he has, without it being on purpose, kind of an appeal to centrists. And he's not by any means a centrist himself. No. He's appealing to everyone because he's a refreshing guy. He has ideas that are different from your norms. And yeah, I think, it would be a smart idea for one of the candidates, whoever breaks away, pull him in as your VP. Give him a shot.
Like, look at the following he's created in his time campaigning for this, with no political background, and just think about the policies he's put in place under his campaign. He knows what he's talking about. Like, it wouldn't be just a publicity stunt to put Yang, the guy who is the social media king of this campaign for the Democratic Party. Like, he would be a good, well-rounded vice president for this country to have, I think, personally.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, he's different. He's, that's part of the reason Trump won is because that base wants a political outsider. And that's what he is.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it'd be fun to see. Fun to see.
With that being said, we will wrap it up there. Thank you guys for tuning in.